Welcome back to Midnight Whispers. If you're just joining us, I'd stop this episode right now and go back to part 1 and part 2 first. This story doesn't work the same way out of order, and honestly, after what I'm about to tell you, I think you'll want the full picture before we get to the end. This is part 3. What was waiting in the hallway? When I last left you, I just heard that voice through my bedroom door, closer than it had ever been on Miller Street, no longer entirely sounding like a child, and I told you that when the sun rose, I found something waiting for me in the hallway. Tonight, I'm finally going to tell you what that was, and everything that happened after. I want to be honest with you about something first. In the weeks since I recorded part 2, several of you reached out asking whether I was exaggerating for effect, whether the story had been improved for the podcast the way these things sometimes are. I understand why you'd wonder that. I wish I could tell you it was exaggerated. It would be so much easier to sleep at night if it were. So, the hallway. When I finally worked up the courage to open my bedroom door that morning, sunlight was already pouring through the living room windows, ordinary and warm. The kind of light that makes the previous night feel like something you dreamed rather than something you lived through. For one brief, foolish second, I let myself believe that maybe I had dreamed it. That the television, the breathing, the voice, maybe none of it had actually happened. Then I saw the hallway floor. There were marks on the carpet. Small, dark smudges, spaced apart in a pattern I didn't want to look at directly but couldn't stop staring at anyway. Footprints. Bare footprints, small enough to belong to a child, leading from outside my bedroom door down the hallway and stopping directly in front of my closet door, which stood wide open, exactly the way I'd left it after that very first night. Except I hadn't left it open. I was certain of that. I had checked it, closed it more than once since then. I didn't call anyone that morning. I didn't know what I would even say. Instead, I did something that, looking back, feels almost absurd in its ordinariness. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and stared at those footprints from a distance, as if giving them space might make them disappear on their own. They didn't disappear. By that evening, they were still there, though slightly fainter, as if the carpet itself was slowly erasing the memory of them. I called Mr. Hensley again that night. I didn't plan to. I just found myself dialing his number around 10 o'clock, needing to hear a voice that already understood what I was dealing with. Someone who wouldn't ask me if I'd been drinking or not sleeping enough. He picked up on the second ring like he'd been expecting the call. I told him everything. The scratching, the 9 nights, the television turning on by itself. The voice that no longer sounded quite like a child. The footprints leading to my closet. There was a long silence on the line, longer than any pause he'd given me before. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. Quieter, more careful, like a man choosing his words around something fragile. "I need to tell you something I probably should have told you the first time you called," he said. "About the boy, about what actually happened to him." My stomach dropped before he even continued. "Grace told you he wandered into the attic and never came back down. That part's true, but it's not the whole story. The parents, before it happened, they weren't good people. Not in the way you'd hope parents would be. There were complaints over the years, neighbors calling about shouting late at night, a few visits from people who should have done more than visit. Nothing ever came of any of it, the way nothing often does in situations like that." I sat there gripping the phone, feeling something cold settle over me that had nothing to do with the temperature in my apartment. "The night the boy went missing," Mr. Hensley continued, "there was an argument in that house, a bad one, worse than usual, according to the one neighbor who ever talked about it openly, and she only told me once years later, right before she moved away herself. The boy went up to that attic on his own in the middle of it. Some people think he was hiding. Some people think he was looking for a way to get out of the house entirely, not just out of a room. So he wasn't sleepwalking," I said quietly, already knowing the answer. "No," Mr. Hensley said. "I don't think he was." I asked him the question I'd been afraid to ask since the very first phone call, months earlier. "Then what's following me? If it's not just a scared kid looking for a door out of an attic, what is it?" The silence this time went on so long I thought the call had dropped. "I think," he finally said, "that whatever's attached to you isn't just him anymore. I think somewhere along the way it picked up something else too. Something that was in that house with him that night and never left either. I didn't sleep at all after that call. I sat in my living room with every light on, staring at that hallway, at those fading footprints, until the sun came up again. Over the following days, I did something I probably should have done from the very beginning. I started researching properly this time, not just the accidental death that had been reported, but everything I could find about that family, about that house, about the years before I ever moved in. It wasn't easy. A lot of it wasn't public record. But small-town newspapers from decades ago have a way of mentioning things obliquely, in single lines buried in unrelated stories, if you know what you're looking for. What I found confirmed what Mr. Hensley had told me, and added something worse. There had been a second name mentioned once, briefly, in an old article about a domestic disturbance call at that address, years before the boy's death. A name that never appeared again in any later article, any follow-up, anything at all. Just one mention and then nothing, as if whoever it belonged to had simply stopped existing in any official record after that single night. I don't know for certain who that name belonged to. I have theories I don't like thinking about even now. But I believe, based on everything Mr. Hensley told me and everything I found in those old records, that the boy wasn't alone in that attic when he died. And I believe that whatever else was up there with him has been looking for a way out for far longer than he has. The footprints in my hallway stayed there for almost 3 weeks, fading a little more each day, until one morning I woke up and they were simply gone. No scratching that night. No 2:47 wake-up call. No voice. For the first time since October began, I actually let myself hope it was over. It wasn't. Exactly 1 week after the footprints disappeared, I came home from work to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Not broken, not forced, just open, the way a door sits when someone has walked through it and not quite closed it behind them. My hands were shaking as I pushed it open the rest of the way, half expecting to find the place ransacked, the other half of me terrified of exactly what I did find instead. Nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed, except the door to my closet standing open again, and this time sitting just inside it, placed carefully on top of one of my old unopened boxes, was a small wooden object I had never seen before in my life. A carved toy, a simple little wooden figure, the kind a parent might whittle for a child 100 years ago, worn smooth with age and handling, one small chip missing from its shoulder. I want you to understand, I have never owned anything like that. I have never bought anything like that. There was no possible way for that object to be in my apartment unless someone or something had physically brought it there and placed it exactly where I would find it. I didn't touch it that night. I called Grace instead, and for the first time since I'd known her, I heard real fear in her voice. Not the tired resignation she'd always carried when discussing Miller Street, but something sharper, more immediate. "Don't touch it," she said. "Whatever you do, don't move it from where it is until I get there." She arrived within the hour, and the moment she saw that small wooden figure sitting inside my closet, her face went pale in a way I'd never seen on her before. She stood in my doorway for a long time before she finally spoke. "I know that toy," she said quietly. "I saw it once, a very long time ago, in that boy's bedroom, before any of this happened. His father made it for him." "Then how is it here?" I asked. "In my apartment, 3 floors up, in a building that boy never set foot in." Grace didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice had dropped almost to a whisper, the kind of whisper you use when you're afraid that saying something out loud might make it more true. "I think he's not trying to scare you," she said. "I think he's trying to show you something. I think he's been trying to show you something since the very first night on Miller Street, and none of us have been listening properly. We sat with that small wooden toy between us for the rest of the night, neither of us willing to touch it, both of us watching the closet like it might do something else at any moment. Nothing happened. No scratching, no voice, no footsteps. Just the 2 of us, and that toy, and a silence that somehow felt heavier than any of the noises that had come before it. The next morning, exhausted and unable to think clearly, I finally did the one thing I'd been avoiding since this entire ordeal began. I drove back to Miller Street, toy in hand, and asked Mr. Hensley to let me back into that attic. Not to close the door this time, but to actually search it properly, in daylight, with clear eyes and enough time to look at everything I'd been too afraid to look at during that first hurried visit. What we found up there, tucked behind a loose board in the far corner, was a small collection of things that had clearly belonged to a child. A few more carved toys, a torn scrap of fabric, and beneath all of it, wrapped carefully in an old cloth like someone had wanted it protected rather than hidden, a child's shoe. Just one. Small, worn, clearly old. Mr. Hensley went very quiet when he saw it. He told me, finally, the piece of the story he'd never shared with anyone. That when the boy's body was found, all those years ago, he had been missing one shoe. It was never recovered. The official report had simply noted it as lost, an unremarkable detail in an already tragic case. I believe, though I can't prove it, that the boy had been trying to tell someone something for a very long time. Not about a door he couldn't find, about what actually happened to him and who he wasn't alone with in the moments before he died. I believe the toy in my closet wasn't a threat. It was a message, delivered the only way he knew how, to the one person who had actually stopped to listen instead of simply running. We gave that shoe and those small carved toys to the local historical society, along with everything Mr. Hensley and I had pieced together. I won't pretend that changed anything officially. Cases that old rarely get reopened, and the people involved, whoever they truly were, are long past any earthly consequence. But something changed after that. The scratching never came back. The voice never came back. No more footprints, no more objects appearing where they shouldn't be. I like to believe that somewhere, that boy finally stopped waiting to be believed. Grace passed away peacefully about a year later, in the same house she'd lived in for decades. The same house from which she'd watched 3 generations of tenants come and go from Miller Street. Mr. Hensley eventually sold the house to a young family who, as far as I know, still live there today without incident, unaware of everything that happened beneath their own attic floor. As for me, I still keep a light on in my hallway. Not out of fear anymore, out of habit and maybe out of respect, for a boy who spent so long in the dark, trying to make someone understand what had actually happened to him. That's the end of The House on Miller Street. Here on Midnight Whispers, all 3 parts, finally told in full. Thank you for staying with this story from the very beginning. I know it took us to some genuinely dark places, and I appreciate every one of you who trusted me enough to keep listening. If you have a true story of your own, something you've never told anyone, something that still keeps you up some nights, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. We read every single one, and if you're willing, your story might become the next one told right here. Until next time, sleep well. And if you ever find something small and unexplained, sitting somewhere it shouldn't be, maybe just listen to what it's trying to tell you.